Fix my t-shirt.
Fix everything. Okay, we will get started. I want to thank everyone for checking this out. We have an all-star panel with us today, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves in just a second. Before we get started, I always like to give my spiel about our resources. If you are watching this, I want to make sure that you guys are checking out a couple different websites. Number one is the DESE site, constantly updated the resources, new ways to implement. Number two, our other state organization, MoShape. I hope that everyone that is being directed to this video is also on MoShape. I know that Mary is rocking her MoShape t-shirt today, and so we got them representing in the house. Again, so I know most of us on this call are all members of that and like to be a part of that network. It's a great opportunity to collaborate with others in your state. So please do become a member of that. And last but not least, Shape America. They are a national group. And again, you know, them along with MoShape, a lot of great resources that are coming out at the national level that trickle down to us, and a lot of great networking, professional development opportunities, because I know we don't have enough of those right now. We have plenty of them. Lots of great resources to be a part of. And so I hope that you guys are checking those out. Okay, let's get into the meat of it. We are talking about moving forward today. A lot of stuff has been going on this past year, as I know we are all aware of. And today's talk is going to be about where we are going from here. What have we learned? What can we take with us? And what are some of the changes that we may be seeing moving forward? I am going to go through and we will do some introductions. I will let everyone introduce themselves because they will do themselves much more justice than I think I will. First, let's hear from Mary. Mary, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Mary Dreymeyer. I teach at Savington Elementary in the Lindbergh School District, which is located in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm also the Director of Technology and Social Media for MoShape. And I've been teaching elementary PE for, since the early 90s. I don't know the exact amount of years, but a very long time.
Awesome. And next I have Christy.
Hi, I am Christy Berry. I am an elementary PE teacher at the Odessa Upper Elementary, Odessa R7 School District. I teach 3 through 5 physical education, and I have been teaching for 22 years. And I'm also the state coordinator for MoShape for Health Moves Minds.
Awesome. And Adrian.
Hello guys, my name is Adrian Singletary. I am a principal at Plaza Middle School in the Park Hill School District. I've been a teacher, a coach, an athletic director, former athletic director, assistant principal, and now in the principal role in the district.
Awesome.
How long, Adrian?
This will be my 12th year.
You're such a kid.
Don't say that, because I'm going to go next before I let you go, Terry. I know, everyone on this call, but my name is Zack Wheeler. I'm the Director of Health and Physical Education at DESE here in Missouri. This is my 11th year in either coaching, district or campus administration, or teaching in physical education and athletics. But glad to be at the state level with you all now. So last but not least, the ringleader of our little cohort, Terry, I will let you introduce yourself and then we will get going.
Sounds great. Thank you. Thanks to the whole panel for being here. We really appreciate you taking your time to share your expertise and your experience. My name is Terry Garner, and I have taught for, got you all beat by a long ways, 39 years. And I currently teach at the Missouri State School for Severely Disabled. But I spent a large portion of my career in the Park Hill School District, and was fortunate at one point or another to teach K through university. So I've got to teach the whole span and loved every single challenge along the way. So happy to be here, happy to share. Zack, do you want to say anything else before we roll?
We have a lot of great talking points. I think it's good if we get right into it so we can get a lot of good conversation going.
Awesome. So let's start with, we all know, students, teachers, administrators, we realize how exhausting and how very challenging the last year has been. It's hard to be on screens all face, regardless of whatever learning platforms, teaching platforms we're using. It's still been challenging. And I think it reminds us of how powerful learning can be when we are all face to face in a normal setting. We're engaged, energetic, and we're focused. And the big question that the panel will address today is, how will the lessons that we've learned over the past year influence the small things as well as the big picture moving forward? So let's get to our questions, and we're going to have discussion around those questions with this distinguished panel of presenters. So question number one, do you feel the past year will change how schools address student wellness? Moving forward, will teachers spend time away from curriculum coverage to check in with every student, practice mindfulness, give students opportunities to connect with each other, and to share their thoughts and feel confident doing so?
So this is Christy. I will start off answering. The first part of that question is, I think overall we went backwards in addressing student wellness. I think our focus was solely on trying to survive and make the online, hybrid, face-to-face learning work. I think it also became a year of survival for the staff and the students. And sadly, wellness and trauma have kind of taken the back seat. For the second part of that question, I think that part is hard, because not knowing when we will return to normal or even what normal is going to look like. I think once we have a solid plan, we can and should incorporate our Health Moves Minds program into our curriculum, which is a social and emotional learning program, into the schools.
Awesome. So I have one point that I was thinking of. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and one of the things mentioned in the podcast, and I'd like to get you guys' feedback on this, was that in the virtual setting, the virtual platform, some of our more vulnerable students actually felt safer with the technology that we're using. And whether that's they feel like they can kind of hide behind the technology, or they just feel more a part of the group and more accepted, I'm not sure. It just intrigued me, that thought, and I would like to just hear what you all think about that.
I had a similar conversation with somebody about that the other day, and one of the interesting parts that someone said was that technology, in physical education, technology is not as thoroughly used as it can be in some other curricular subjects. And for some students who sometimes feel, less athletic or less competent in a skill, that technology and the differentiation of how we're approaching physical education in this environment has almost been an equalizing factor. It's been a variable that has equaled the playing field, so to speak, of focusing more on a cognitive approach or a fitness and individual based approach, instead of some of that traditional team, competition where some students maybe will shy back because that's not really, their strong suit. That the technology has actually given a really interesting platform for that, equal playing field of individual performance and improvement. And I love that about what's, if we can find silver linings for all of these, which I always think that we should, that has been one of mine, where it's given a different perspective to physical education and shown some different ways that students can succeed in different platforms. So I love that part of it.
I have a personal story of a young girl that last year she struggled in PE. She had a lot of anxiety. And when we went virtual, as you know, in the spring, a lot of it was relatively optional because we were in survival mode. she would attend every single physical education class, and she rarely participated during the school year. And she enjoyed it. She was engaging. And then, when we do have the virtual classes this year, because we're in person, she's very engaging. And I've seen a difference in her this year in actual in-person physical education. She is participating more. She's more secure. I honestly don't know the answer why this happened. I'm so grateful for this. But I think the virtual setting actually helped her in that situation.
Yeah, Terry, one thing I would add to that is that one thing we need to be cognizant of is, as for the most part, we can say that it would be a difficult, our students learn better, or they have better experiences when they're in face-to-face. There's also kind of what Zach talked about, that silver lining, that this also is an opportunity for some of our other learners that might be dealing with some social issues and some social things as far as anxiety and those pieces. They've really kind of flourished in these opportunities to kind of say, hey, I'm not dealing with some of those other pieces there when it comes to being around others and things like that. So there are some positives there. And really, to echo what Zach said, just that opportunity for to really look at this idea of individual goal setting, really focusing on that wellness when it comes to the individual, that intrinsic motivation. If students are setting those personal goals, whether that's a workout plan, whether that's a health fitness goal, whether that's they're working on something as far as their own health and food decisions and things like that, there's a lot more ownership that's going to be happening there, because they're having to do that more on their own. Now, they still could have the need, and probably still do need the guidance from their teacher, and do need guidance from their school. However, it is an opportunity, as we talk about kids building resilience and kids building that idea and those opportunities to effectively grow up. It's an opportunity for them to really flex that muscle, if you will. And so I think there's an opportunity there for that mindfulness. We have looked at in our district, we want to work a lot more and kind of focused a lot more really on the physical piece, but more along the lines of that mental piece, that mindfulness, looking at Castle's work on the SEL curriculum, as we look into not only working the body, but also working the mind. And so that's been a focus in our building, not only with the students, but also from a staff standpoint of how do we keep our staff healthy, to make sure that they're in a position that they can be successful. And one of the biggest things that I always talk about is we got to make sure that we take care of our staff. And the analogy I use is kind of like an airplane, right? You fly it, you're on an airplane. And if you've ever ridden an airplane, they go in, they're doing all the seatbelt check, right? And they're doing all of that. But they talk about that mask falling down in the case of air pressure, And so with that being said, we have to secure our mask. They always say we have to secure our mask before we can, before you can help others. So I think that's a very, very important analogy, that we have to make sure that we as adults make sure that we're practicing that mindfulness, make sure that we're doing those things so that we can help out our students. And if we're strong and if we're secure in that, then we can go ahead and facilitate that learning and growth for our students as well.
I love that you brought that up. We did one of our webinars on self-care, and I like to call it care to care. We really have to take care of ourselves to be able to care for our students. The other thing that you talked about that I want to highlight is casel.org, CASEL.org is a great resource for social and emotional learning activities. So if you're viewing this, jot that down. Great resource for you to look at. Thank you, everybody. That was a great. Anything else on that anybody wants to say on number one? Thanks for sharing. That was amazing. Okay, question number 2. Will there be investment in essential resources for the future? Will our teachers, and this is opinion because nobody knows for sure the answer to this question, but just thinking forward, will teachers be provided training in effective digitized instruction while ensuring all learners are given access to technology that has become essential for learning? And then the second part of that question is, or has it? What do we really need as teachers and as students to be able to teach and learn?
I think, I'll hop in. I think both. I think that there has been an effort to promote that, but I also think, having gone through what we've gone through recently, more effort will be thrown forward to what resources are needed that maybe we don't have. And, to touch on that second part of it, what resources do we really need? What is absolutely essential to allow us to educate versus what is just handy to have and what may make our job easier, but what is the bare bones necessity? And are we providing that for all teachers in all districts, in all urban, rural areas in the state, to make sure that that level playing field needs to be there? And I think that, with things like grant funding and new PD opportunities coming out with, partnerships, I think the funding will be there to start to see what those necessities were that we did not have in place when this all happened. And digital education has been in use, but nowhere near as thoroughly as it has been this past year. And I think we have found out that we are very capable of translating our education to a virtual platform pretty quickly when needed, because it was needed this year. And it's been lovely to see, but I think that there is room for improvement. And I do think that it will continue. Virtual classrooms will continue. I hope that, because I like being around kids and like being on campus, that it starts to lessen, because we want to be in our classrooms, we want to be in our environment. But it is exciting to see the reach that we can have with those new resources and with that advocacy from those groups to say, hey, what resources are needed and what resources are just nice to have, and let's focus on what we really need to extend that education as thoroughly as we can. And then once we build that foundation and that platform, then we can start expanding on those and then be able to provide more out of that. And so this year has been, we're all first year educators this year. I've been telling people that, no matter where we've been, everyone's a first year teacher this year. And so no matter if you're at a school district with a lot or with a little, we've all been asked to do the exact same thing, which is just provide for our students the best that we can. And it's been really nice to see how schools with a lot of resources and schools with no resources have banded together and helped each other just to provide for our state. And so it's been nice to see, and I think that we're only going to improve moving forward from here. And this was, as much as, again, and Adrian just touched on this, the last question, touching on silver lining. If you can find silver linings on this, this has created us to see exactly what we are capable of as educators and how we can pivot, how we can react to something. And hopefully this will be the last time that we have to react, and this will cause us to put more advocacy into our action and building forward to prepare for these things instead of reacting. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how we can continue to grow from this. And I think that our classrooms, both in person and virtual, will be a lot better for this moving forward.
Awesome. Anyone else? I'm going to ask a question that'll hopefully make you react a little bit. So here's my question. Did the pandemic expose inequities in access?
100%.
So think about
yes.
that. Did it expose something that we need to address as we move forward? I know at my school, some of our students were using paper packets because they didn't have access to Wi-Fi, and they were in rural communities. Our students we do have one-to-one devices, but all the devices were at school because I work with students with severe disabilities. So then we needed to deliver those devices to the students for them to be able to connect and interact with their teachers at whatever level was possible for them. So I just want you to share, did you guys experience inequities in access? And did you have students that didn't have opportunities? Was it not the same for all your students? And maybe brainstorm some solutions as we move forward.
Well, I would definitely say there's, not only just there's the question of access, but there's also the issue of success, right? When just because you have the device doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be successful of using it. And so, yes, I would say there's already those pieces out there, those elements of I'm going to refer to that as the opportunity gap, right? And so, if anything, it exacerbated it or just made it more prevalent, right? In some of our communities, and probably in some of our more underserved communities, to where Terry, I think you were talking about, like, and maybe in certain spots, you knew that some of the inequity was there, but if you try to, it just puts a more of a magnifying glass on it, if you will.
Mhm.
And it's kind of like, okay, here are my expectations in the classroom, or here are my expectations that we have for some of these students, but we don't know how this pandemic has affected all of our stakeholders in our community, correct? I mean, and so we don't know if we're dealing with families that have lost loved ones. We don't know how families have dealt with job loss and some of all those things. And the reality is that as we look at those things, we have to balance all of that while still trying to maintain a curriculum that we're providing, a rigorous course and all those things. But the reality is if I don't have food in my stomach, if I can't pay to keep my lights on, how important is the curriculum? And so I think those are some of the challenges that a lot of our families are facing, and a lot of our communities we've had to face as a school district, that oftentimes we can surround our kids with that safe learning environment from the start of school to the end of school, but as soon as they leave my doors here, that becomes the challenge of when they go back to their homes, of what's the world in which they're going to encounter. And so the pandemic has definitely put a magnifying glass on, not necessarily on the haves, but especially on perhaps the have-nots. And so the supports that we have in our schools and our community through providing free lunches and some of these other programs that we have around the state and around the nation have definitely helped mitigate some of those things and some of those pieces. But that's all unique to each individual environment and community.
Mhm.
And Terry,
Absolutely.
I'll kind of add to this. So this is the week that a lot of people would be starting spring break. And just this week, I told the students, I said, next Friday, we don't have school because of spring break. And I had at least 5 of my kids that don't have the best home life. Are we coming back? Like, they're worried and anxious. Like, are we really coming back this time?
Mhm.
They don't grasp that concept that, yes, we're moving forward. And I said, yes, we're coming back. I said, vaccines are happening. Things are starting to open up more. We will be coming back. So they're already experiencing that anxiety now before it even spring break happens.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it was a traumatic event for
Yeah.
everyone, and some more than others. And I think, and that's what we're getting at. And I hope that our leaders and our decision makers are really looking at how best can we support these students, and hope, like Zach said, hopefully this won't happen again. But we need to be proactive rather than reactive. I think a lot of us were caught in a pivot, and scrambling, and it was more of a survival mode. Some of us were more prepared, but I would hope that we all will be better prepared now. And that, and I also hope, we have transitioned. Terry and I lived in the city, and we moved to a more rural community, and our Wi-Fi opportunities are terrible. They're terrible. And I'm thinking, there's got to be something with everything that we know and the technology that's available to us. There has to be something for students across the state. There has to be an opportunity. So, anyway, 2 cents. Anything else, Mary, you want to add to that?
Well, I just wanted to talk about my district, which is not so much social emotional, more about the technology. Our district was kind of reactive. We were going to do one-on-one push out. They accelerated that. they had to. They provided with students that were having difficulty with Wi-Fi, they provided hotspots, which I ran to get because I don't know if you noticed I froze up. But so they've been making attempts. They've been educating us on the different family situations we might come across. Like, for example, if the kids are having trouble with their internet, and, you know, I'm speaking from the elementary point of view, giving them tips on how to help that. In other words, turning off your camera helps take less bandwidth, you know, things like that to help the students address those maybe Wi-Fi issues. And then also the emotional piece of some kids are going to be in different situations in the virtual learning, and they're going to want their camera off for one reason or another, and not to force them to turn the camera on. So we've received a lot of really quick training. We're still in our learning phase. We're still learning because in my opinion, when I first started learning about this, I thought, well, everybody needs to have their camera on. I need to be able to see them. I need to be able to see them to teach them. And it didn't even occur to me about the background situations for the students. So it is a huge learning curve for us. And I've been very proud of what our district has done to help prepare us. We still have a long way to go, but we are moving forward, and hopefully we won't be as reactive. We'll be prepared next time. Well, I hope there's no next time, but if a situation like this occurs again, we are going to be more proactive.
But just what you said, Mary, we've learned from it. We have learned from, and we can carry that into whatever teaching platform we're using. I don't think it has to be, you know, I really believe and hope that in every scenario, we've learned something that will make us better teachers, better schools, better administrators, better leaders at the state level. So that's the silver lining. We're all still learning, right? Okay, number 3, what does the future look like for possible learning platforms? That led right into that. Will learning eventually combine asynchronous online elements with synchronous elements, enabling students to interact with each other, their teachers, and the learning content all at the same time? And how do we think we'll achieve this? And I got to tell you, I had this vision as I was reading this question of this holographic teacher being beamed in to lead the class, and maybe a holographic administrator. Adrian, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd be the holographic administrator, you know, just you know, monitoring the halls and things like that. And yeah, I think this is the $1 million question, right? What does the learning platform look like? And if I had to answer, I probably wouldn't be talking to these fine folks. I'd probably be speaking at a mini convention around. Yes, that's right. Getting
Yeah.
that money, you know. And so, but I think this is a fantastic question, and so one that has multiple answers. I think we're already doing this work, and I think every district around the state is doing this work when it comes to learning platforms. We use Schoology here in the Park Hill School District, but I know there's other platforms like Blackboard and many other Canvas and some many other platforms that many districts use. And so with that being said, I think the technology is there, and there's a lot of opportunities to see what really works for each unique community. When we're talking about this idea of asynchronous versus synchronous learning, that's very, very tricky, because I think it depends on the capacity of the community as well as the capacity of the school district. One of the things that's been a challenge this year is that I oftentimes think that there's a disconnect between what is online learning, right? And what is true online learning versus what are the expectations. And so there's a difference between that synchronous and the asynchronous piece. I think back to my college years, and I'm thinking of, okay, well, if I had an online class, it was a whole issue of, okay, I'm gonna log in and respond back to one of your classmates, and you'll get your points. And I think that's the challenge. And so I think people look at that as, well, we don't want that, we want this kind of to build an online community of learners. We want to have a community of learners that they interact with one another. They are talking, and they are really learning together, and they're growing together. Hence the reason why we have that synchronous piece. What we end up running into is some logistics, right? And those whole things of how do we do that at the same time that many districts were doing things like hybrid, and how do you teach an online class when I also have kids in my class, right, at the same time. And so I think a lot of districts ran into some of those challenges, and I think that becomes very, very difficult, especially when you start talking about the capacity also of just your teaching staff, right? And so what ended up happening is we have teachers that are teaching students in a group A setting, right? They have the alphabet A through K, and the next day they're teaching L through Z, but at the same time they're teaching kids in a digital space, and also students that are in the hybrid, but they're also perhaps quarantined because they were exposed. And so you have 4 different modalities, also not even accounting the number of preps. And so now teachers are scrambling to being like, what am I actually doing? And so I think it causes a lot of anxiety, and it could lead to just a lot of burnout and loss of hopelessness for some of our staff members. So I think what it goes to is, what do I see for the future? I do see that kind of old adage, if you know better, we should do better. And so if I go back here and I think about what we've learned along the journey and how we move forward, I do think that we've learned, and I've stepped in it a little bit, you know what I mean, of making some mistakes. But I think that it will be, I think districts are going to have to go back and see what really works for the community. If there's an expectation for there to be synchronous learning, then I think it's important that the school district build an infrastructure that is geared towards that. If that means hiring extra staff that are strictly dedicated to online, then so be it. If the expectation is for an asynchronous model, and then they can build that into their master schedules and things like that, as long as there is effectively just clear communication. I would say, guys, to me, communication has been the best currency this year and over the past year. Effective communication, it oftentimes makes people feel, it calms people's anxiety down, and people need to understand what's going on. And so that asynchronous piece versus synchronous, I think that's going to be unique to every district, and really, honestly, what are the expectations of that community?
That's awesome. Anybody? You covered that question so well, we're not going to have anything else to say.
Can I say ditto?
Yeah, can we say ditto at this point?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll say I could like ditto 0.5, I would say. 100% agree with everything Adrian just said. The thing I might piggyback on is I think it's opened up a lot of ideas for what is possible in how we reach our kids in education. And I believe in the saying, necessity breeds innovation. And I think that having seen what's gone on will cause some differences in adapting to that instruction, whether it be synchronous, asynchronous, and starting to look at the different modalities and different ways we can, and causing some, this is my opinion piece, and I hope this happens, causing some places to look at alternative methods in instruction and not sticking with that what has been done and has always been done, will always be done method of what we've always done this, so let's just do this, and see this as an opportunity to say, how can we better ourselves? And this goes back to, I think, the first question, where it's, are we acting or are we reacting? And instead of just reacting to when that need happens, why don't we use the opportunity to not only better ourselves now, but prepare for that future and take the initiative and see what we can produce? And whether that is asynchronous, synchronous, there are, of course, the pros and cons for all, and that's for a different discussion. But I think that it's a good opportunity to see what is possible, and have some of those, whether it be software based or digital in-person based. And I agree with Adrian that it's always the age-old question of how much staff are we allowed to get, and it's it's always impossible to get more, but we always need more. And so a lot of it is a staffing related thing, which I think does come to that innovation of some of that digital and software stuff, because if they're not, they meaning just the system in general, is not going to allow that increase in staffing to a point that we think we could adequately serve all those students, a virtual and digital platform where possible is a good addition to what we already do. I will never view it as a substitute, because I just don't believe in that. You need that connection with your students, that person to person. But I think that finding ways to integrate that digital virtual platform is a good addition to what we're already offering. So I think that I hope that innovation is explored and that we can utilize that later.
I'm laughing at myself because Adrian talked about his online course. When I was in college, there was one computer that you went and you could log on to. And it was a huge, huge piece of equipment. I mean, it just, where we have come with technology is amazing. And if you look at some of the work being done with artificial intelligence in education and some of the tools being used that could be used in a face-to-face classroom, I mean, it's just kind of mind-blowing, the possibilities. And you laugh about the holographic teachers. There are countries that are piloting holographic teachers, and they're beaming people in to teach these classes. I mean, it's just, the possibilities are endless. And like what Zack and Adrian both said, it will depend on the community, the resources, what's going to work in that setting. And I hope we look at the possibilities, because I think it's exciting. I think it'll totally change self-directed learning for students, and differentiated instruction will look completely different if we're open-minded to some of these technology tools. I'm not discounting the face-to-face, the relationships. I am all about that, but I just think there's a lot of possibilities in the future. It's going to be fun and exciting. Year 40 for me will be really crazy. Okay, here we go. This leads into, will schools return to a focus on traditional skills and rote learning rather than teaching life skills for the future, such as critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration, adaptability, communication, and creativity? And I get to speak to this one first. So I'm going to give you some thoughts about this. You know what, folks, some people are already doing all of these things. I'm not saying they're not, but I spend a lot of time in professional development and training teachers across the country. And some of the districts I went to were not doing that, and some of them were. So once again, there is such a continuum of what we're actually teaching and how we're doing it across the country. It's all over the place. And in Missouri, I've been in a lot of schools in Missouri. There's a lot of different things going on. My hope is that we can all improve. So here's one thing that struck me. Research over this past year has determined that lessons between 15 to 30 minutes are most effective when you're teaching and you're delivering knowledge. And that made me think that we really need to, that should cause us to reflect on the effectiveness of our current educational model. In some places, students are in classroom for hours upon hours with limited breaks. And I know this is a simple thing, but if we could really change and enhance the educational setting by simply doing shorter lessons and infusing regular breaks into our teaching environment, how's that going to impact learning and student wellness? So I don't know, that's my 2 cents on that. And then as far as I really believe that we need to keep the social and emotional needs of our students in the forefront as we move forward. And Adrian alluded to this earlier. If my social and emotional wellness is not there as a teacher or a student or an administrator, then my ability to teach, to learn, to concentrate and ensure that learning is taking place, not just through evaluation of test scores and output, but really being connected to and understanding our teachers and our learners. So rather than focus on recalling information, I hope that we can focus on exploring some of the ways that we might do that in the classroom. I'm thinking creating podcasts, looking at case studies. In physical education, the students are giving some parameters and they create their own game. So there's simple ways simple shifts that we can make that will really impact what we're teaching, and giving those students opportunity to learn those life skills. Okay, I'm off my soapbox.
I like the fact that you brought up brain breaks in the classroom and that the students taking those breaks, because it is important, like you said, for their social and emotional well-being. And I hope everybody looks at updating their curriculum moving forward. Like you said, exploring new resources and new things.
I think if everything we're doing stays the same, that's a travesty. I think that when things like this happen and things are brought to the spotlight of, for instance, what's been going on with student mental health throughout the pandemic across the country, that it has brought a spotlight to the educational factor that plays that role in how we assist with some of those. And I think that if we don't use the opportunity to allow ourselves to see that attention and to see the need for that and build in things like that into our curriculums, as far as even something like a mindful minute, even some small things to put in that maybe have not been given as much attention in the past. And I think this is a good opportunity to see those differences and see the needs and see what this pandemic has caused. And not only, again, and I'm sounding like a broken record player on this, not only how we react to those things, but how can we build on that reaction into creating action for the future. So that way, when something does come up in the future, we're already in a great place to have programs or resources in place that we do all the time anyways. That way, I don't think that we're going to get to COVID-21 or COVID-23 or whatever, any numbers like that. But anything that does happen where, say, our kids need to leave school for a month or a week or two, we are fully capable of going to a virtual platform that includes social emotional wellness, mental health wellness, not to mention the content. I was on a webinar with a leader from a different state, and it was, her big thing was, we're teaching students first and content second. And as simple as that sounds from an educator standpoint, that just made it so much clearer to me when I explain it to people, where the content and curriculum is great, but it's the student first. It is always the individual first, and the content is in the backseat of that. And so we're providing for our students and making sure that they are in a position to learn and they're in a position to be a part of our school community. The content will come later. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how we adapt for this and building forward. And I do think that the teaching will change, and I think that the way the classrooms are set up will change. Will it happen right away? I don't think so, but I think that that path, our right foot is down on that path, and I just, we're going to start walking down and we'll see where it takes us.
When we talk about this question, I think a lot about my principal, and she's amazing. Her name's Dr. Dakisha Parker. And when I ask similar questions of her about this, her only answer is to me, it better not, when I ask her if it's going to return to the way it was. She has always had that student first mentality, but I think people, parents, families are seeing more of this importance. I know at the high school level, they're so worried about their ACT score. They're worried about, well, if they don't get this stringent curriculum, are they going to be prepared for these things? And our new superintendent, he's been really great, and this is also accelerating it as well. He has and he didn't coin this phrase, obviously, but we're preparing our students for for jobs that don't exist yet. That's been his mentality the whole time, and he wants to get away from that testing, get away from all of the traditional teaching. I know my principal and administration, they want to create experiences for students. It isn't a 15-minute lesson, a 20-minute lesson, take your brain boost. They want the whole experience to be a movement-based experience. They want to integrate things together so the students are learning, but they don't even realize they're learning. They're moving, they're doing different things. So I do like the direction our school is going. And I think with this whole pandemic, I think parents are starting to see the value of that as well, because they're nervous about change. And whenever they see the value of all of this, of students being happy, maximizing learning through experiences, I think we're going to see great things. I think great things are going to happen. And I think this pandemic has just actually accelerated the goal of our district. And it's kind of how I feel about it.
That's awesome.
Well, Mary, I think you brought up a good point in the fact of oftentimes in resilience, right? Our kids are oftentimes a lot more resilient than we as adults. And so the change oftentimes comes at for us as the adults in reconciling that, and how do we change, right? We're humans, we're creatures of habit. And so when we do things over and over again, it becomes a habit. And if we've taught a certain way for X amount of years, and this is how things have been for X amount of years. And so the wrench that got thrown in was COVID-19. And so as Zach said, we're all first year teachers, and now we're all in the swimming pool. And right now we're all looking for the floaties, right? We're all looking to grab onto something just to hold on. And so I think if we're looking at that, I think that there's opportunity there to look at some of those pieces that you talked about, Terry, as far as those critical thinking, those problem solving, all those things that we always talk about, right? That are in our mission and our vision statements, that are all nice flowery words, but oftentimes we fall back into some of those old habits of, curriculum. This is an opportunity for us to kind of really not talk about it, but be about it, and really say, all right, let's actually go ahead and live up to the true nature of our mission and our vision. And so I think it's an opportunity for districts, like you said yourself, Mary, that you're in, to kind of say, actually live those words, and really take this as an opportunity to really change what education looks like, not only for the state of Missouri, but just public and private education throughout the nation. And so it is an opportunity, much like it was a profound, thing for our communities to deal with last spring with what was going on around the nation and around the world. But if we're continuing to look for that silver lining, right, it allowed us to pause, right? It allowed us to slow down. It allowed us to take a deep breath and to reevaluate how we were doing life. And part of that aspect of how we were doing life is how we were educating our children. And so as we go forward, that is one thing to make sure that we don't go right back into some of those old habits, because it feels comfortable, right? And so that return to normalcy, that phrase gets thrown around all the time, a return to normalcy. Well, that normalcy needs to, again, we were talking ahead before the meeting, that new normal, right? And that new normal is, how do we take some of those things that we talked about, and how do we ultimately change the lives of our students and the communities in which we serve?
I want a better normal. Do I hear an amen?
Yeah, that's right.
I want a better normal. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Okay, number 5. Did you discover creative assessments, where assessment is part of the learning journey, kind of a continuation of what we were talking about? Students as partners, students co-design activities and assessments, making them active participants in their learning.
This is my question, and I grapple with assessment all the time. I always question over assessment, under assessment. It's a difficult subject for me, and it's always something I'm looking to improve on. And so let's go into assessment in a virtual setting. I was fortunate enough to have that as my goal before the pandemic hit. Better, more efficient ways to assess, because I feel like a lot of our assessments take away from student learning, and that bothers me. So I created an assessment strategy with my students using Seesaw. It's an app that many of you probably know about, and I thought it would be pretty simple, but it was a learning curve for me. fitness test, state required fitness test, I felt like I spent a lot of time on that. The validity of it was difficult when the students assessed each other. And I felt like I wanted to give good data to the state. So I had students record themselves doing the actual assessment, whether they were doing the push-up assessment. And they posted it on Seesaw. And then they told me what they felt like their score should be based on the recording. And they would look over the recording and they'd look for the cues. And they had a list of cues that they had to look at. And then what I would do is later on, instead of taking class time, I would look at the Seesaw video, and then I would give them feedback. Yes, this is what you received, you were correct, or no, this is what you received for this reason. And then they could reassess themselves and try again. Their parents were able to see this assessment and know there was no question on what their score was because they could actually view the video of it. And that worked out really well for me. I was totally prepared to use that in the virtual setting. And I was so thankful to have had that training with the students. But we never went fully virtual. So it is in my back pocket if I ever need it, that type of assessment. I've been in slowing down survival mode. I've reassessed what my essential goals are and my essential standards are at this point, because going hybrid, you see them half as much. And then we went full in person and we had kids that haven't been in school for months. So we had to step back and do more of the social emotional, more of trying to just take care of the students, just trying to spend time with them. So I had to pare down all of my essential standards. So I'm doing a lot of observation with assessment. I do have partners assessing each other. I feel like whenever you have partners assessing each other, they really think about what the essential goals are of that skill when they are looking for that checklist of things. So I do use partnerships a lot. But I think I have a lot to say about assessment, but as it relates to COVID and our pandemic, I'm still in the learning phases of that. I'm not sure how it would look if we went full virtual again.
That's awesome. I'm like going, yes, 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 while you're talking. I've always loved student created activities where you give students parameters or rubric and they create and collaborate. That's been a part of my teaching for a long time, but I love what you talked about, self and peer evaluation. I think that's a great way for students to assess one another and assess the skill. I just think they learn so much more in that type of assessment. I also really appreciate peer instruction, and that depends on the grade level, how you would do that. But students taking responsibility for teaching a particular skill, I think that's a fun way for them to be creative and take leadership. And just now, I mean, there's virtual field trips or tours or virtual type of assessments that you could use. I think that it's really going to help us look at how we assess and why. It's like the why, the how, and what we do, right? Why are we assessing this? How can we do it to create a more creative environment, and what can we actually gain from that? So yeah, kudos, Mary. That's awesome. Anything else on assessment?
The funny thing from my level, and I'll just add this in real quick, is obviously this has thrown a wrench in state fitness testing and also state mandated CPR testing. And so one of the funny things that we have gone over multiple times is being creative, as you were saying, Terry, of how do we assess, the in-person CPR performance aspects if schools are fully virtual and they're not on campus. And we've housed those questions from 20 something different districts. And we've had some great conversations of helping people be creative and how they assess the in-person performance of CPR from a virtual setting, on the assumption that students don't have a CPR dummy laying around in their house. I'm assuming they don't. finding new ways to confirm that they've done that, whether it be practicing CPR and compressions on a pillow or a basketball, or there's just been it's been great to see how creative we can be with assessments to at least make it as valid of an assessment as we can. It's as good as we can do with what we have. And with fitness testing, having to, DESE, we put forth a plethora of resources on doing at-home fitness testing, different resources for teachers to use to submit data and to do the tests. And I think and we said this earlier in the presentation, it's as good as we could have done given the time and the resources that we had to do it in. And I think looking forward, we're going to have all these resources moving forward, so we have these to build on moving forward. But it's been fun to be creative with some of these assessments where we're so used to using all of our same assessments. All teachers have used the same tests and same methodologies forever, and we've all done the same things. And it's so funny to have a year where we have to switch all of it up and figure out how we can do it differently. And it was almost refreshing to get to break out those creative chops and sit down and see how can we do this differently than we do it every single year. So it's been nice to see how different we can make it and how we can rally and use those creative chops, which I think educators love to use and we don't get to enough. And so it's been nice to break down some assessments that we do all the time and do it different. And so it's been nice to see.
Awesome. Okay, you guys, as we wrap up, I want you to just share briefly what's one thing you want to leave our viewers with as far as what has been revealed to you over the past year. What's something that's been revealed to you?
That all families and educators should be considered value partners, that they're all trying their best.
Awesome.
I'll go next. It's almost a repeat of, I think Adrian said it, is we have to take care of ourselves before we can take care of anyone else. And I've really started doing that. It has really helped me become a better teacher. And if I'm not physically healthy, mentally healthy, I'm not going to be the best teacher to the students. I'm going to be frustrated. I'm not going to be as patient. And through this whole thing, I have gained so much more patience and so much more compassion. I would hope I was a compassionate teacher before this, but I really truly feel that I'm taking that moment and taking that breath because I've taken care of myself first. And so I do agree with Adrian in that we have gone through a lot, and we are first year teachers, like Zack has mentioned. And I run around confused half the time because things are so different, but I'm okay because I've taken care of myself first. And I think teachers need to remember to do that because they are going through a whole lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for me, I would say that I would echo all those sentiments. It's really revealed the character and the resilience of our teaching staff in our workforce, both certified and support staff. We've gone through tremendous. We've all had this, we've all experienced this shared trauma, right? And so I think we have done a tremendous job as far as and really kind of brings to light the human spirit. And so I would just say, I've learned just what we can endure and really just what we do for our kids and what we do for our community. And I think that's something that in every community, whether it's on the Kansas City side, St. Louis side, or anywhere across the nation, across the globe, educators have definitely worked hard, countless hours, and will continue to do so because that's the reason why they got to that profession, right? Those altruistic beliefs and giving back to the community and giving back to something greater than themselves. And so I'm proud to be a part of this panel. I'm proud to be an educator. And this pandemic has only just made that passion even stronger. And so that's what I've learned through all of this process.
Awesome.
The big thing that I've been taking away from, this has been for the past couple of months now, is it shouldn't take a global pandemic for us to come together as a planet for the better of our students. And it has been amazing to see the progress that has been made in education just this past year, when a lot of people have been looking at some of the negatives, which there are plenty to be seen, but seeing how when our back is up against the wall, just as you know, not only in Missouri and in our country, but as a planet, this is hitting every corner of the world, how we can come together to put our minds together and create committees and coalitions and groups to serve students everywhere. And there are things that have been done in Missouri that have been replicated all over the country in other countries. And there are things that have been produced out of Japan or Germany or Canada that we have heard of, that we have learned on other panels, that we have brought in to utilize in what ways that we can. And it's one of those things, and again, this is the last time I'm going to say in this whole webinar, I promise, it's the silver lining of this is how we have come together. And this never would have happened. And could we have stayed the course and gone about education as normal? Sure, we could have. And would we be okay? Yeah, I think we would have continued to grow. But the fact that it didn't, and the fact that things changed, and how everybody came together to produce what we could when we could, and what that has started, that's just the spark that will light the fire that's going to spread all of this through, and how we're going to be able to produce better education and better resources for the future of our kids. Is we owe that to this. And it's been great to see that through tragedy and through, there comes triumph through that. And to see how we're going to get through this and become better because of it is a great thing to see. And I'm looking forward to seeing how we take this and improve not only for ourselves, but hopefully continue that outreach and continue these Zoom meetings with different states and different countries to see how we can, education shouldn't be about us competing with test scores from another country, or it should be about all of us reaching all of our students as best as we all can together. And I look forward to hopefully seeing that.
Absolutely. For me, you guys, it's that teaching and learning are rooted in relationships. That just confirmed. I knew that before, but it just was very evident through what we've been through. And I really believe that schools can continue, or maybe some schools need to start focusing on relationships by centering them in policy and in practices. So regardless of how learning is taking place, whether you're face-to-face or virtual or hybrid, that could include like advisories, regular meetings, one-on-one small group opportunities for students, teachers, and administrators. But I think everything needs to focus on those strong relationships and communication. Adrian said that at the very beginning, that communication has been key this last year. So those relationships and communication, I think it changes everything. That's awesome. Well, this concludes our questions and our sharing today, and I'll turn it over to Zack. But I just want to thank each of you for your time sharing today. I just really appreciate you and your willingness to be here and share your experience.
Yeah, this has been great. I want to thank everybody again for putting together this all-star panel, and we could not have had a better group of voices from every different corner of our profession for the state to be a part of this. And so again, thank you all for being here. For those of you that are watching, I hope that you enjoy this, take a look at the other ones that we have. And I'm looking forward to doing the next one. I hope that everyone has a great day. We will see you guys next time. Take care, guys.